Very much. The conversation is a pleasure, a personal pleasure of me welcoming to the program Dr. Sidney Greenfield. He's a dear friend of mine and of the world. He's a scholar extraordinaire. I would really be quick to say he's written voluminously in the field of anthropology. He's an anthropologist, has a great deal of attention given to the country of Brazil, but he has a large systems way of taking in information and having it become part of the way he sees the universe, which is a very good feature. And Sidney, welcome so much to Conversation.
Thank you, Harold. It's a pleasure to be here.
Let's go quickly. We've done a number of programs with you. Quickly, you're an anthropologist. You were at University of Madison. Where we've had
I was at University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee.
In Milwaukee. And just quickly your background, just a few minutes, and then we want to get in, we want to talk about the implications of, well, among other things in the news, Mr. Gaddafi was just assassinated, as it were, and then also the implications of that, and then also the implications of what's going on downtown with the Occupy movement and so forth. But just quickly your background.
Okay. I was born and grew up in Brooklyn, went to Brooklyn College, and then got my Ph.D. at Columbia University, have done anthropological field work in the Caribbean and in Brazil, and I've done historical research in Portugal on things like the beginnings of the slave plantation and plantation slavery, and done research on the relationship between religion and healing, and have studied a large number of religions in addition, taught in Wisconsin, and retired 15 years ago, moved back to New York, and this essentially is a quick thumbnail background.
That's very quickie, and you also kept your mind very engaged in terms of understanding the human condition and very much appropriately understanding politics and so forth of the human condition in a major way. And we're going to put on our website of you're going to send along your CV to me.
Yeah,
it's voluminous. You have been so busy. I don't know how you have time to do anything other than sit in front of a computer or typewriter and write. No. You've written so much, and it's all good.
No, it's mostly that I do field research, and what I write is based upon the observations I make in different parts of the world.
You've led a very well-led life, sir. That's what
I've been very fortunate.
Yeah,
I'm very happy.
And you're also lucky to have Ellie in your corner. Your wife, she's lovely, and you're a great team, and all of that. So it's so good to welcome you to the program. Among others that we've been in touch with, I and you also, is something to do with economics and so forth. And you understand. I wonder if maybe we could talk about that, because anthropology is a very all-inclusive kind of field, and one of the things that they take very careful attention to are kinships and the means by which individuals or groups of people get a sense of their identity that informs their behavior and their political belief, and that's very much important. It seems that's very important now, and maybe you could discuss that, the idea of how do human beings get their identity, and how is that distributed out when you have different levels of political organization. It's a very kinship groups and so forth are really or tribal are very important, are they not?
Right, but let me try to do this, because we started before we went on the air talking about the Occupy Wall Street movement. And I'd like to try to relate that to your question and point out that the Occupy Wall Street movement is fascinating, and one can almost argue, as some have, how come it's taken so long for this to happen in the United States? But what I would like to do is step back from a broader perspective and look at the Occupy Wall Street movement as one of a large number of protests going on around the world. And this includes things in the United States, including the Tea Party movement, the things that are happening with Christian fundamentalists, and all the way across the world through the Arab Spring and in many other parts of the world. And try to point out that what we tend to do, we being in the United States, and this is the media and intellectuals, is we like to focus on one thing and zero in on it in terms of specifics and detail. So we're looking at Occupy Wall Street in that they are occupying Wall Street and pointing to Wall Street as the problem. Now, the people involved are backing off and trying not to do that. What, in effect, they're trying to say is that something is rotten.
Right.
And we have to get at what is rotten to do something about it. The media is pushing the Wall Street Association, just as they do in terms of the right, and the Tea Party people are opposed to taxes and big government, and that's the issue.
Right.
I think if you look at all of this, what we are seeing is that all the way across the world, there are people saying the institutions we live in terms of are failing. They are not doing what we have been taught they should do for us.
In a systems way.
In a the system.
Structural problem.
The system structurally. And it's not just the system, it's not just one issue, and it's not just the system of big government. It's not just the system of Wall Street and financial bankers. It's much, we've put together, or it has grown up over the last several centuries, a system that people have been taught primarily through the educational system and its extensions, that if they grow up and do what is expected of them, they will have a decent life that they could be satisfied and happy in terms of.
Right, yeah.
It's not happening, and what they're doing is complaining about it. These protests are anger, their bitterness, their disappointment, and what I think is most important about it, it's people saying, hey, it's not working, help.
Yeah.
And the people in charge of these institutions who are doing very well in terms of them are saying, no, we have no solutions. You want to come up with something? That's your business.
On their particular special way of seeing things.
And what it means, you know, we have to go back also and realize that the institutions I'm referring to, the system I'm referring to, was the one that was built up out of the Enlightenment.
Well,
in England and France primarily.
Yeah, the Scottish Enlightenment.
And the Scottish, and this is a Western European movement that came out of efforts when back in the 16th and 17th century, people were saying that the institutions of our world are not serving us. Things have changed. The world has changed. We need something new.
I wonder, that's all really interesting. You said, we started talking about the thing downtown, and then we got talking about things that went back a little bit in history. Then we got back to the Enlightenment and so forth. How comprehend, and when you're saying, when they're saying that, as I understand, the thing that's evolving around the world, they're sticking to, I think it's wise, they're sticking to what they call horizontal. That is, they're out including more and more takes on what's going on, which means you can include more and more of the quote-unquote academic disciplines within a systems way, which is comprehensive thinking.
You can also include...
You understand that?
Yeah,
but
you can also include more different concerns so that Wall Street isn't the only thing that you're concerned with.
I think they're actually trying. That's what politics is involved with, a lot of it in the contemporary sense, and I think they're trying to avoid setting up one thing that then they can address. Defending the status quo can shoot down easily, and I think they're wise in that. But what it does is it brings us back to the role of the intellectual process that we have. And then you took it back to the Scottish Enlightenment and so forth. How far back could we take it to try and get
Let me do two things.
Louis Leakey was an anthropologist, I think. He was concerned with Australopithecine. He was concerned with an issue that goes back to the very beginning of this Homo sapien consciousness. And it's possible to get back into, and even a glancing understanding of the implications of the physics of the universe could begin to be taken into account by intellectual people in a systems way, so that you can get a very large pattern that you're talking about, the change we're talking about. It's not the deck chairs on the good ship capitalism or something like that. It's much larger, the transformation that may be heralded now, because there are qualitative differences that are taking place at this very moment that make this unique in history. Probably people have thought that. Do you understand what I'm saying? Reach out to
Let me make a distinction for you. I started observing and describing what was happening with Occupy Wall Street and relating it to a lot of activity, protest activity throughout the Middle East, what have you.
Right.
Okay. If you look at that and analyze it, you can analyze it in terms that I'm saying of this essentially being a protest reaction saying the institutions aren't working.
Yeah.
What you're trying to do is shift it to another level of analysis.
More inclusive.
Not more inclusive.
No, I'm trying to do it.
No, what I'm saying to you is...
To get away from...
Wait a second, wait a second.
That's exactly what I'm trying to do.
It's not more inclusive. It is another level where intellectuals sit and look over what is happening out there and pontificate in terms of it. We can do that.
Okay, I'm going to take exception with your premise.
We can do that, but what I want to do is separate it to be able to say that what is going to come out of all of this most likely is that people are going to try to introduce innovations that usually take them back in time to their own history, and really they are attempting to fix what they see as broken. This is on the level of the streets, if you will, where people, the activists, are involved. And that's something very different from what we could do sitting here in this room, where we try to come up with what might be happening in global terms or some other...
universal terms.
In universal
terms. Now, you're
terms.
taking, if I may, this is an argument that's on intellectual ground. You're trying to say we have to deal with the specializations of understanding what's going on, because that's the way the academic...
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Let me make the point.
That's not what I'm saying, though.
What I'm talking about is this horizontal thing. It doesn't just stop with politics. It doesn't stop with the Enlightenment. It stops with a comprehensive kind of taking on things, a systems pattern of thinking, which is really the prerogative and the responsibility of the intellectual community. People like, I would suggest, Buckminster Fuller, or the people who thought, or Voltaire, or people who are thinking very broad, except now we're getting, every day comes a revolution. There's something going on at a very large level, and we can begin to understand things in an information overload permits pattern. We can recognize large patterns that become very inclusive and not broken down into specialization that is the lot of the intellectual, talking about the intellectual community. There is no department of everything at the university.
There may and may not
be. But we're getting to where we can see things in that term. What department would it be?
Again.
Or is there any reason for doing that? Or you want to avoid comprehensive systems thinking?
No, on the contrary.
Seems to me you want to get into tunnel vision and specialization.
On the contrary, what I'm trying to add in for you is that human beings behave in terms of social interactions, in terms of things that they believe in and are trying to do.
Yes.
And the intellectuals touch on this process by spinning out ideas, and the two come together, but they come together in the social dynamic that is occurring out there. And what I'm trying to say to you is that whatever is going to happen coming out of all of these social movements depends on what the people in the streets and off of the streets
and in the
are
intellectual
doing.
quarter.
Hold it. Hold it.
Okay.
You are adding something that is there only partially because you're trying to move it to another level that leaves out what is happening
leave out, it
on
includes
the
it.
streets. No, it doesn't.
I argue. I take exception
include
to your premise, sir. I take exception to your premise. For instance,
then wait a second. Let me just say one more thing. Because what you're doing is taking exception to my premise as an anthropologist, and the only reason that I am here is to add an anthropological and sociological framework to the discussion.
Okay,
so
thank you. Now let me make a point. You've been talking 5 minutes, okay? Taking a take. Now, if I understand, Louis Leakey was an anthropologist. If you had to think, he discovered that we have been the Homo sapiens species. You want to limit it to the species? You want to limit it to the thinking of people from the Enlightenment only? You want to limit it to some little group of history? He found Lucy, Homo sapien was contained within Australopithecine 4 to 7 million years ago. We didn't exist. Homo sapien wasn't here to develop kinship groups and so forth. They were a whole different species, and he found Lucy. And we were contained. There is a change in things through time that's becoming more inclusive. It begins to get a broader picture that you can get to, and you can even put that down into the development of the evolutionary process itself, and to have a passing acquaintanceship with things in a comprehensive way to get at a larger, more inclusive. That's called systems thinking on a large scale that's becoming possible now.
You are stepping on my toes.
I'm sorry.
You're stepping on my toes because you're taking a paleoanthropologist who fits into, that's Leakey, who fits into evolutionary studies in anthropology.
Yeah, but now you're
Excuse me.
Okay.
That is biological anthropology that we study. What you're doing is by a kind of sleight of hand is jumping from biological anthropology and the biological development of the human species to something abstract of a universal evolution, which there is no foundation for in anthropology or any other science. In fact, it becomes dangerous unless used very carefully because what it leads to or can lead to is social Darwinism, and we know where that has taken us, and you've got to be very careful. So please, as we do this, let me try to restrain you.
I will be restrained. I think you have to get the string theory. You can think Isaac Asimov said on a program, this is the defining generation in evolutionary terms, not political terms, in evolutionary terms, this is the defining generation. I would like to get to that, but I won't bring it up ever again. I won't talk about it, but that's where we can go. It's newly available to us now. We've not been able to do that, to break everything down into paleo this, paleo that. Break it down, and I say that's the problem. I won't bring it up again. Tell me about kinship.
Let me suggest to you that what you are doing is taking, or you're using the Occupy Wall Street movement in this case to argue something that has very little to do with it other than what you might add to the discussion that's going on.
I don't see it that way. It's just something that's becoming available to us historically, uniquely now, and we should take advantage of it.
It's a level of analysis that may be of great interest to you and maybe to me, but has very little to do with what's going to come out of all of these social movements.
These social things you're talking about is not evolution, that we may be coming to a new relationship in the universe. Any of these issues that are larger, we won't deal with any of that. We'll deal with one specialized thing about the human history. What are we going to deal with? You know about kinship and tribe or identity. How do human beings get it? We won't go to that. I'm sorry, that's where the answers are in my view. But anyway, we won't go to that. But we'll just go to an anthropological view of, can we say 200,000 years humanity's here, civilization started 8,000 years ago, we had feudalism. Go to the human condition, and that had to do with the political reality. That's something we see on a normal pattern. Okay. And what about your understanding of the importance of the means by which individuals, individually or in groups, get a sense of identity? How important is that in terms of social organization onto the, maybe having relevance to the present moment?
Okay. In our world, that again is the world of Western Europe that has been stamped on everybody else.
Yeah.
You are dealing with a highly individualized society.
Yeah. Since Columbus, maybe. Huh?
Well, no, it goes back after. It's actually after. What it goes back to is that Western Europe has always been characterized by small kinship systems that focus on nuclear families.
Okay.
Most of the rest of the world operate in terms of larger kinship systems where individuals on the basis of birth become related to other individuals with pattern kind of behavioral expectations and exchanges. Now, what most of the small-scale societies anthropologists have studied historically, individuals become members of society through their kinship system, that by virtue of being born, they are related in this way to certain individuals, in other ways to other individuals, and you are able to organize a society, a productive system where individuals interact around production, distribution, social behavior, reproduction, and so on and so forth, using kinship as a major mechanism.
Is that characteristic in varying forms? We've had 5,000 years in the East, in China, we've had Mesopotamia and that. You studied with Karl Wittfogel, I think, Orient. Is that a characteristic of both East and West organization of empire? So we go back 6,000 years to empire.
Now what you're looking at is
rather than just Western Europe,
organization of larger groups than kinship groups. And now you're using
I'm asking, are the kinship groups similar in various parts of the world?
No, what I started saying was that historically, going back, say, 10, 15,000 years, let's say, most societies were organized in kinship terms. Then what you got, mostly through conquest, was organizing larger groupings that get you into various kinds of empires and so on and so forth.
That's Karl Wittfogel.
That's Wittfogel.
Yeah, really good writer.
Now what I'm trying to get back to get us up to the present is that in Western Europe, where you had small families primarily, other kind of groupings came in. Voluntary associations of varying kinds, where people organized around specific concerns like production.
Is this Columbus, or what date would you say this becomes relevant in terms of the Western experience?
All right, in the Western experience, in terms of kinship, it goes back 10, 15,000 years.
Long time.
So it's a long time, and when you have the growth and development of larger groupings, one of the things that becomes characteristic in the Western world, and this starts really in after the fall of Rome into, say, the 10th century, is the organization of society into kingdoms and sub-kingdoms. Hereditary kingdoms where you use kinship to justify who the ruler is of a kingdom, which is a certain territory.
Dynastic state.
And let me just add one piece here, where from an economic perspective, the economy was the household of the royal family.
Yeah, okay.
So what you had is this larger group in which what we call peasants fit in as dependents in this hierarchical system.
And that was sort of historically legitimate. It came to be 1,000 years after Rome.
Right. Yeah. That was very legitimate. Yeah. Now what happens...
It was considered that by the people at the time.
What happens out of the Enlightenment that I'm trying to get at to make another point here is that with the Enlightenment, number one, we rebelled, or people at the time rebelled against monarchies, royalties, and everything that went with it, and established two major institutions. One was changing the kingdoms into nation states, where they proposed electoral systems to include the people into the government so that the government would do the wishes of the people.
Yeah, that was very unique
to this. Yes.
Because they had come down to Louis XIV, the divine right of kings.
That's right.
It was divinely ordained as most of those
which took revolutions to create.
Yeah, it was huge change.
Related to this was the economy, which is precipitated by the Industrial Revolution.
The steam engine was invented.
The steam engine and every other piece of technology since then that went into the productive system.
Right.
The unit of the economy became the nation state. And Adam Smith talks about the wealth of nations.
Major year 17.
Not people.
Right.
And what we're stuck with is the relationship between what is produced in the nation and what the people get from that production. And we have a whole system that develops around this, and these are the institutions that I'm referring to that come out of the Enlightenment.
Yeah, right.
Okay, now what you have to add, the United States becomes the poster child of the Enlightenment.
After the Second War?
No.
Oh, before?
No, the American Revolution.
Oh, yes, okay, thank you.
The American Revolution
right.
creates the ideal of an Enlightenment state as an experiment.
Only about a third of the people supported that at the time.
The point that I'm making is that system is failing today.
Yeah, that system is
But I want to add one more piece if I can.
Yeah, okay.
Because that system and that model was expanded through colonialism.
Right.
And up to the end of World War II, much of the world was organized where people lived at the local level with local production systems and kinship systems and everything
that had held over a longer period.
That held over a long period of time. And the colonial system was imposed on this, that after World War II, everybody copied the model of the nation state as a system of organization.
And called it the historical
legitimacy. But also the world capitalist system, which came out of the Industrial Revolution in Western Europe.
1776.
So that for the last century, from, say, the beginning of the 20th century up until the end, we have, under modernization, almost everybody throughout the world has been dragged, not literally dragged in.
Or conquered.
Conquered or forced. Everything from NAFTA, if you want to include it, and other. What we have done is drag everybody so that we have destroyed local production, local organization, local identity through kinship system, and everything else, and have introduced states where identities become the equivalent of ethnicities. So instead of being a Tutsi, you are now a Tutsi within Rwanda as a nation state, where you have to struggle for who is going to control the nation state.
Just as Louis XIV had it down to where it was divinely decreed that that dynastic state was the divine right of kings, so then those who established this system, moving with history, have the idea or the creation stories we came up with earlier, the religions and so forth, to give solace to the fact that we had a self-reflective consciousness, could ask the bigger questions and so forth. But then that system that developed, and then particularly after the Second World War and so forth, the United States, they think that that system is historically legitimate. The feudal period thought they was legitimate. It was overthrown, very difficult. Still lingers with certain kinds of things. But now the people who are advancing that system of organization that we developed and have imposed on the world, 5,000 languages, different ethnic identities, but it's the nation state that comes to do it with thumbs being elected and, you know, showing you've been in an election. We think that's legitimate to the whole world, and to, in the historical sense, it's the divine right of a plutocratic class that runs everything and sets up these so-called nation states that can be manipulated by the Manidi.
Now, can I add one more piece I want to add?
You understand what I'm saying?
Right.
And it's now, it's not. There's something new needed, blowing in the wind is happening downtown, thank goodness.
But let me add one more piece that becomes very important here. And that's the development of religion and the unique role and the unique belief systems of Christianity and Islam.
There were things before. And there's
no.
You want to stick to those?
I want to stick to those for the following reason.
Okay.
Now, again, as the good anthropologist, I know quite well there are lots of different kinds of religions.
Yes.
However, Christianity made its peace with the organization of societies in Western Europe, specifically the kingdoms, and the relationship between the Roman Catholic Church and the kingdoms of medieval Europe. And with the Reformation, the Protestant denominations with the post-Enlightenment system, and they also viewed the world in universalistic terms.
Well, yeah.
The Muslim world organized society differently in terms of kinship systems and tribes, and the caliphates, the caliphate, which was supposed to be the unity of all of Islam, the Ummah. The point I want to make to you in this, as today, as people are turning and saying, the institutions that were created out of the Enlightenment, that have spread throughout the world, that have promised us, in effect, a better life, and for some have delivered, for larger and larger segments of the population are not delivering, and people are complaining. But what is happening in the midst of all of this is that, for example, the fundamentalist Christians, Protestants, in the United States and the Western world are saying, see, the problem is that you in your secular world did not heed God's word in the Bible.
Let me have a word.
We want to change these institutions and bring them back to, and I want to emphasize this because this is very important. We want to go back to. But remember one thing. One thing. Christianity is a universalistic system that does not acknowledge any other belief system than Christianity.
Well said. I appreciate.
The same is true for Islam. So underneath all of this turmoil and anger in the world, both of these belief systems, in a fundamental sense, are looking to go back to historical origins that never existed.
Okay, now stop for a minute. You're talking. You say, now you denied the ability for us to begin to take intellectually in a new kind of way the measure of everything, even to when we get down a telescope that takes a picture of the Big Bang 13.8 billion years ago. So we have to go, and humanity developed 200,000 years ago best out of the hominoid line. We can understand things in scientific, intellectual understanding of how we got to be here. But the people that were living for 120,000 years or 150,000 years before the civilization and so forth were endowed with a self-reflective consciousness that could ask larger questions than was a lot of the creatures. And they came up with sitting in front of Cro-Magnon caves or whatever, what the hell is it all about? They could come up with creation stories about the larger issues that were contention, part of their consciousness, right? So they come up with creation stories. They got creation stories that they put great faith in, and it was done out of mass, in terms of now, ignorance of what the reality was. We're now coming to where we can understand things in an intellectual, scientific way, but the people have traditional creation stories. The Eskimos thinks it was created by a polar bear sitting on an ice cake, and the Christians thought it was this and that. They all have creation stories that are fundamentalist. I was trying to propose an attitude of mind that is synergetic. It's a resonancy. There's nothing absolute. We're evolving within a synergetic universe. We don't know. It's a systems way. There will be something beyond Homo sapien at some point. There was something before Homo sapien at some point. We're evolving in a larger context, a synergistic, intellectually relevant way, rather than repairing to the ignorant-based creation stories that people invested their identity in. But you don't want to go there.
No,
you
on the contrary. On the contrary, now I'm perfectly willing to go there with the following caveat.
Okay.
And the following caveat is that what you are suggesting in this leap is
that is characteristic.
Is perfectly okay if you accept the fact that when we start with the Occupy Wall Street movement and all of the protests going on, we recognize that something is going to come out of that.
Yeah, what's coming
that
out?
We can't necessarily control from here.
Thank you.
Great.
You mean, are you talking temporal terms or in time? That it's maybe a little bit in the future? It's a little in the future?
This is the point at which I want to agree with you and say, on the one hand, what I want to do is observe what happens, and this may be bloody, it may involve revolutions,
let's hope
it may not, let's hope not.
Yeah.
But you see, here are these human beings that you're talking about who they have this ability to understand or ask questions and to be conscious of their place in the world. But we as human beings don't know any more than anyone else.
Well, wait a minute.
So
what do you mean anybody? What do you mean anybody else? Excuse me. Do you
the
mean
intellectuals
like
you were referring
no,
to?
not the. No, there are people who understand things in a way we can understand, and collectively, what you have is it's like latent heat in physics. There's ability. There's an ability. One of the metaphors I use, and I think it's worthwhile, I'm getting back to the fact we don't want to think about political change or capitalism overthrown or something. We want what we have to begin to start thinking about. When we get to a point where the extended consciousness through technology and tools is unique to us, we can make the world different in an Eden-like sense, has come to a qualitative point of departure from history. And that we now have the ability, and I've been talking, I was over at the planetarium with physics, we now, and it can be agreed by everybody readily, that we have developed the extension of that technology through technology was primarily by political leaders was weapons. We developed weapons so one tribe could have an advantage over another, become powerful, make their tribe strong, realpolitik. It still serves as a model, okay? And the other side, we have a technologically augmented capability to provide for all life support for all of the human society and their trends into the near future, and the ecology that is uniquely unique to this moment, not yesterday, not the Enlightenment, it's just to this moment. And that we have to start thinking, we're coming to a point that can begin to tap into that. We have the way to go. We can either annihilate the whole species. That is characteristic of the weapon systems that exist now, and it continues. It's there in potential. We have the ability with good design and good thinking and intelligent not denying because of some creation story or something, the liberation of the humans, the whole of the human society in a way. We can provide for everybody, unlimited care. Every day comes a revolution in terms of understanding the larger context in which we occur. On the living side, and that's what's at hand, and what we have to begin to start thinking, we're coming to the end of the Homo sapien experience. We're coming to the end of the birth canal. We're coming to a new relationship in the universe at a cosmic level, And it's very hard to get to that, but that's the characteristic of which we're coming. This is the time, that's characteristic of the time in which we are, Harold, to bring it up to date.
All right. This is not a put down, Harold, but the key word you said was we can think about. Now, what I'm trying to do...
Intellectually understand.
Whoa. We can think about, and what we do, you and I here, is we can sit and think about it, and I can think about it with you. What I'm trying to do, and again, let me go back and say, I'm sitting here representing social science and trying to say to you that what we do is observe what is happening and listen to those involved and try to understand it.
Yes.
And if we want to make hypotheses as to what might be happening, we do that, and we test it against what happens.
Right.
Okay.
That's scientific process.
Okay, that's the scientific process.
It's being questioned now by all kinds of fundamentalist notions of what's real.
What I'm saying is everybody's questioning everything
good
about... Fine, you're saying it's good.
Yeah.
I may half-heartedly agree with you, but I also may say, this is interesting.
Yeah.
From the social science perspective in me, this is fascinating what's happening. It also could be very dangerous.
But why?
But we will see what comes out of it.
Yes, it will be synergetic.
And
we have to be humble.
I talk about the ability to solve the world's problems with what we can do. This is thinking. This is talk. This is interesting.
No, this is
love talking to you about it.
No, this is
this is different from trying to understand what's happening in the world.
Well, with all due respect, I think you get somebody who thinks that way. We have that way, but what they've done, if you get down to political things and that kind of thing and everything, is they have, I saw that it was dangerous. You even said so in a pre-taping thing, that originally when Mr. Eisenhower said it's the military-industrial complex, obviously they're very important in terms of the structure of world society and the war making. They got these dystopic predators going all over the world, tremendous extension of power, visionless. They don't have a system in order to bring some sort of a qualitative, liberating...
This is part of the system, Harold.
Pardon? That's part of it.
The military-industrial complex is part of the same system that Wall Street is part of, that fundamentalist religion is part of. This is the system that is being questioned by all of the protest movements around the world.
God bless them, but I'm trying to say to you that it came out, I just found it out, because it's coming in don't you understand? Every day over the transom it's coming just... I had a friend who was with the guy who took AOL public, Norbert Wiener. Cybernetics, we haven't even mentioned it. That's all coming, the extension of that. And he posited that information it's like information overload. It's coming in all fields, and it permits pattern recognition rather than specialization. And when they break it down, you're not just a social scientist, you're a human being. You're a human being thinking. You're not just limited to one tunnel vision. The CIA's limit. So what I'm saying is pattern recognition is permitted. We can recognize on a very large tablet now. We're not limited. And when Eisenhower, let me finish the thought. When Eisenhower said he was going to warn against the military-industrial complex, it wasn't originally in the original thing, military-industrial academic process. The intellectuals have been made innocuous by having them all specialized out rather than thinking systems to get a picture that includes it all the way the grand strategy people think. They think only in terms of their area of discipline because they're innocuous in terms of giving a large pattern, a challenge in large terms to the people who run the world.
The pattern I was trying to point out to you was that all of these protests, if you look at them in terms of the pattern, are questioning a set of institutions that you are perfectly willing, and I will do this with you, to move beyond and say, let's all forget them and let's restart the whole thing.
No, they're moving toward inclusiveness of the whole of what's going on. That's what they're moving toward. And I think it's very wise, because we don't need specialization about bankers with the, or anthropologists, one little thing they study for 30 years, one culture, or one history, or one thing. They've divided the intellectual community up. It's gotten worse with linear regression. They get all specialized out and innocuous. And they're going on one particular, they confuse specialization with scholarship. What you need is comprehensive thinking, in my humble opinion. We don't have it. And these kids are encouraged to go that way because we're not at a moment of political change. We're at a moment that brings synergistically, we have to start thinking speciation. We have to start thinking about a new relationship to the cosmos and Homo sapiens.
Let me agree with you and ask a question. And that is, how does what you're talking about relate back to what's happening on Occupy Wall Street?
Well, the main thing,
wait a second.
Okay, go ahead.
And how can we develop a language that enables us to talk about what's happening here, what the people are talking about, and what you're talking about?
Well, I would just say a couple of things that would come out of it. Do you agree, as a human being, you don't have to be an anthropologist or any human being, that if you think about it in a way, we've developed all these things, we get special theory of relativity, we get Teller, we get hydrogen, we get thermonuclear weapons, we get wave weapons, we get chemical weapons and so forth, developed to give a political advantage to one group that's going to conquer and steal and all that and everything, and set their pattern and conquer. And that those weapons have, or did they ever become, in 200,000 years of evolution, certainly it wasn't the case as recently as our lifetime, the Second World War, there was something existentially different in terms of evolution, that they became, if they're unleashed, they would kill every single human being on the planet. Do you think we reached that point at the level of capability?
We certainly have.
We have. Wait a minute.
Wait a second.
Do you realize what you just said? Do you realize what you just said? Do you realize the existential significance of it?
Let me answer your question.
I'm just asking if you realize what that means.
Let me answer the question.
Okay.
And what you're saying then is this is part of the pattern
of this moment
that came out of the Enlightenment institutions that are being criticized.
No, that's too limited. It came out of 200,000 years ago in my thinking, comprehensive. Because you have to go to physics. You have to go to the special theory of relativity. You have to go to string theory.
That is a product of Enlightenment thinking.
Well, I think that's too narrow, I suggest.
It's not too narrow.
It's not enlightened.
It's historically...
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Is that the case? That's the thing. In the Second World War, we were impotent, right? In terms of being able to kill the species? No, Sid, no, just talk. Just talk to the issue.
Yes.
We were impotent. We were trying, weren't we? Dresden, firebombing.
Harold, this is the point. What we're realizing is that the institutions that created this ability to make bombs for all kinds of technology is somehow about to destroy us.
No, that's exactly the point. But I just say the beginning point.
The question becomes, how do we, in terms of these protests, begin to deal with that?
Well, for one thing, I disagree with you thinking it began with the Enlightenment. It began when we came out of the cave. Everything was here. The resources.
No, we had no understanding of physics.
Thank you.
And we had no understanding of the ability to make weapons.
But we have a rendezvous from 200,000 years ago. Long wandering, running away from cats, all this kind of stuff, kinship groups, all of history and all. We have a rendezvous with this moment, what they're doing downtown, with that beginning of that state of consciousness in this universe. That's the thing.
In your thinking.
In the thinking.
In your thinking.
Well, you said it. We absolutely.
In your thinking.
No, you made with all due respect, when I said, did they become species lethal, or are they? You said, of course. Is well understood. Do you realize what an existential, significant event to destroy the leading edge of consciousness in this universe is in existential terms?
We have people in the government.
I'm trying to make a case for now.
We have people in the government of the United States that is perfectly willing to use tactical nuclear weapons to fight our enemy.
Yeah, but that's another issue.
No, that's part of the issue. The human beings that we're talking about have incorporated, in terms of the institutions we're organized, in terms of the ability to use these weapons and every other weapon available, including our computerized world, to undermine and fight the other nations and other peoples in the system we have organized of organizing ourselves in nation states.
Yeah, okay, okay, that's good. I understand. And that comes out of the, I understand.
Now, this is the level we have to talk about.
But why do you avoid the question? Why do you want to avoid the very fact that there's something new in terms of the time at which we talk that makes it in a different context, calls for a different context, and that it's existentially significant? We now possess the ability to stop the evolution of consciousness up the hominoid line, which we've been part of.
And destroy it all.
And destroy it all.
And you know something?
And you answered it, yes, of course we do. And it wasn't in our early lifetime.
Understand that in terms of our society and our government and some of these protest groups, there are people who are dying for that to happen.
I know.
So that we'll all get raptured. And this has to be included.
I understand. That's part of the. I understand.
This has to be included in any discussion.
The point being is the potential of this extended consciousness was characteristic of our species. That's the point. That's on one side. The other side is, could you as readily, and a lot of people would say, sure, we can destroy the whole species. Now, it may be, oh, well, we made we defeated the Russians, everything's okay, the good guys are in control, and all that, everything's okay, and everything, but it still remains at a potential level. You're talking a potential, not the existing, not the reality. On the other side, this technological development, and all the cyber things and nanotechnologies, new materials, new capability of being able to provide for everybody, ability to provide life support for everybody of the planet, and the population trends has crossed a major equal. When do you think that occurred, that the weapons, it's about 1970, most of the model shows that we crossed that existential line where we could destroy the entire species and evolution of consciousness. On the other side, there came modeling, Fuller. Some of the other comprehensive thinkers came up with a judgment. How much are we being aided by technological extension of productive capabilities to where there would be more haves and have-nots in the world within an ecological context? They came up with the year, the 50% mark, 1970. We're at a time of qualitative. We can either liberate. We have the means now, which we haven't had historically.
Who is the we? Who is the we?
The human society.
The human society cannot act as a unit. And the point I've been trying to make to you is individual people interacting are the ones who move society in any direction that they wind up doing.
Not talking about that.
This is what.
Yeah, but I'm trying to talk about something different.
You're talking about a qualitative. We have nothing to do with reality.
No, you're not. We haven't blown up the society. Doesn't mean the potential is there.
Saying
we can live
that this is dangerous.
You can model the capability of providing everyone with a living standard where they can realize their full potential. You could not have done it in history. You could not have done it in history without the knowledge that has come to this moment.
How do you translate that?
Well, then you translate it into a major premise.
How do you translate that into the behavior so that when people are involved in a crisis situation?
Well, one thing you could do.
Can I finish? Can I?
Yeah, Chris, but we got to get the word in before the end of the hour. Yeah, real quick. I need 40 seconds at the end, okay?
Okay. No, my
real
question becomes, how do you translate this so it becomes part of the ideas that, to use Milton Friedman's term,
you're going back
in
politics.
A crisis, no, what he said, in a crisis, its resolution depends on the ideas that are available.
Okay, yeah, and
how do you then translate this into ideas so that all of those people who are protesting and demonstrating, when the thing blows up as it can possibly do.
Don't say that even. Don't even say that. Don't even say, if you're talking about the unleashing, it would be irrational unleashing of the weapons to destroy the whole thing. Don't even think that. But one thing that would be good, this thing I'm trying to drag out of you, you won't face it. We can destroy the species, yes, you deserve. Yeah. Now, what about the fact we have a unique now capability, not characteristic of 1776, not characteristic of 200,000 years ago, a knowledge base, an evolution of consciousness and universe to liberate the human society within an appropriate ecological context that we've not had historically, and we've only had it since about 1970. We have transcended material scarcity as the basis of which we get an operating manual for Spaceship Earth, how we're going to organize our political organization of this Spaceship Earth.
You have given me grounds for another protest and another movement to stop this. And I keep saying to you, this is what we have to get back to and put all of these pieces together so that these ideas will be out there in the social dynamic, which will lead to which will come out of a resolution of this particular
Can you understand that the point is, it would be nice if we have transcended scarcity at the level of design, and things are coming exponentially. We haven't even gotten to the exponential capability. Can we imagine a world where everybody is freely able to realize their full potentiality in all dimensions, liberated rather than enslaved as they have been by power groups throughout all of history? We're coming to the end of history. We're coming to the end of the context in which all of human organization has evolved. We're coming to a new relationship. We've transcended scarcity at a material level. It can be argued in scientific terms and modeling. And shouldn't it be nice, if that's the case, that it be mentioned once in a while, rather than all the details of how you got to get this or that or that. And that's what the youth are doing. They want systems.
You just did that.
Tried, but it's never said.
No, you asked me earlier about kinship and social organization, and you have taken and given me a presentation that's divorced of its articulation with human social relationships.
Well, it's got to be related.
Excuse me. And all I'm trying to do is to say, this is fine to be added into the hopper, but you've got to give me a language that translates it and makes it workable in terms of human social behavior.
I would repair you, sir, to the thing. It's on my website. It's on the Internet. The Internet is there for autodidactic tutorials on everything other, without going in all the details of the specialty. There's one on there that's really relevant, and there are others. There's modeling, you can go, and it's one that's called Operating Manual for Spaceship Earth. That's a thing that Mr. Fuller put together, taking this premise.
And
that's
when did Mr. Fuller put it together?
Well, it was around 70. It was around 70 when we crossed that line. They were sensing
That's almost half a century ago.
It doesn't matter.
And wait a minute. And how come that hasn't entered into
Because all the academics are specialized out and say we've got to do this and that.
It's there.
It isn't in the public consciousness. It isn't in the public or the political dialogue. It isn't put in the political. They're just reifying outdated institutions from history, and you need to have a context that can be understood on a very large tablet.
What you're doing then is denigrating the intelligence of all of those protesters.
No, I'm not at all.
They're not stupid.
Not at all.
They're looking for
not at all. They're looking for something, and why deny a premise that could be a basic thing that they could be understood in a synergistic scientific
down to the level of social
bullshit.
Action.
I'm sorry, it is. They can understand it. They can understand it. They can understand that. That's what they're
saying. If they want to sit and join our conversation.
The context. But not arguing about how many people can
I will grant you that fully, Harold.
Well, then they should be mentioned.
I love this discussion.
Then we can get to real economics.
I love
You're
this
dealing
discussion.
with it. Okay.
But what you're still not doing is acknowledging that there is very little relationship between this conversation of ours and what's happening.
Well, I digress. object to the most serious thing.
Because you're telling me 50 years ago somebody said this, and we thought beautiful ideas.
Just keep watching. Just keep watching. It's going to emerge, whether you want to or you want to stand in the way of it. It's going to emerge.
Still alive.
We have transcended.
We may not be here.
No, we have transcended material scarcity at the level of capability, and that's going to become a major premise that's going to be advanced for setting the operating manual for spaceship or for all the political things to be fit into. It will emerge.
Unless you return it as we do to. We started with Occupy Wall Street.
Yes, God bless them.
Excuse me.
We agree on that.
The hedge fund managers don't buy up the entire means of production.
Couldn't agree more.
So we cannot have it.
Right.
Okay.
It's an exciting time. Ladies and gentlemen, come in. I just think it ought to be picked up. It ought to be on 5,000 feet high letters going around time. There is enough. Yes. There is enough. It should be mentioned once in a while, rather than arguing.
Not enough under the potential, under the way we distribute.
Obviously, but we got to get to a new way of distributing, understanding that first.
You refuse to talk about how.
That's just economics.
No, that's not easy.
They killed Muammar Gaddafi because he had a way of doing that, and they see it because they're all
reifying. They killed Muammar Gaddafi for lots of other reasons.
Tribal reasons of identity.
No,
you could have talked about
political reasons that come out of the political system that we're criticizing and complaining about and saying doesn't work. And unless we constantly get back to that, then we're losing the discussion.
One thing we agree on. God bless the people down at the Occupy Wall Street and the world
and every other protest group around the world.
Amen.
Not only Occupy Wall Street.
Protest and get them warm blankets, and may they be sustained in their noble effort. Okay. Thank you very much for viewing. Is Sidney Greenstreet, scholar extraordinaire.
Greenfield, please.
Greenfield, I'm sorry, we're old friends. Happy to have brought that to you. Please